My name is Sophia Hale, and not too long ago, I was the woman everyone whispered about. The one who lost everything after her divorce, my home, my savings, my confidence, even the friends who swore they loved me. When the court papers were signed, I walked out with a single box of clothes and the haunting echo of my ex-husband's laughter. For months, I lived in a tiny apartment with nothing but a mattress on the floor and silence that felt louder than thunder. I tried to rebuild my life, but the world had already decided I was done. My former friends avoided me, my family kept their distance, and every job interview ended with polite rejection. I used to stare at my reflection and barely recognize the woman I had become. My once bright eyes were dull. My spirit dimmed. I was living on instant noodles and borrowed hope. Some nights, I sat by the window and asked myself if this was punishment for loving too deeply or for trusting the wrong person. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything changed. I was walking home from a grocery store when a black car pulled up beside me. The driver stepped out, a man in a dark suit holding a folder. He looked like he had stepped out of a movie, calm and composed even as rain poured down his shoulders. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but kind. "Are you Sophia Hale?" I hesitated, clutching my grocery bag tighter. "Yes," I replied carefully. He opened the folder, revealing documents with my name written across them. "I am a representative of Harris and Moore Law Firm. We have been trying to reach you. Your grandmother, Evelyn Hale, passed away 3 weeks ago. You are the sole beneficiary of her estate." I blinked, unsure if I heard correctly. "Her estate?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes. You have inherited $4 to $7 million. The world around me blurred. The rain no longer felt cold. My breath caught in my throat. I thought I had nothing left. But in that single moment, my life, my entire existence, shifted. It was not just an inheritance. It was a message from a woman who had believed in me long before I believed in myself. And this is where my story truly begins. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and old paper. The air was cold, sharp, and still, the kind of silence that felt too heavy to breathe in. I sat there in my plain black dress, my hands clasped tightly on my lap, pretending to be calm while my heart pounded loud enough to drown out every word the judge said. My name echoed through the room again and again, each time sounding less like a person and more like a problem that needed to be solved. Daniel sat across from me, perfectly composed, his lawyer whispering into his ear as if victory were already his. He would not even look at me. The man who once promised forever now looked like a stranger waiting for my destruction to be finalized. I used to know the shape of his hands, the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his voice. Now all I saw was distance and calculation. The judge's voice blended with the sound of shuffling papers and pens clicking. Words like division of property, custody, and liquidation floated around the room. They sounded clinical, detached, but to me, they felt like knives. Every word sliced through something I had built with love and hope. I watched as lawyers discussed my life like it was a transaction. My house, my car, my savings, my dreams, all reduced to items on a list. When the judge announced his decision, I felt the floor vanish beneath me. The house went to him. The business we started together went to him. Even the car that carried our memories was his. I was left with almost nothing. Not even my last name felt like it belonged to me anymore. I looked up at Daniel, expecting at least a flicker of guilt, maybe even pity. But his expression was blank, satisfied. His lawyer reached out to shake his hand, and Daniel smiled. That smile was the final cut. The one that broke something inside me. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. My hands trembled as I gathered my papers. No one in that courtroom looked at me as I left. To them, I was just another woman who lost. Another broken name on a case file. Outside, the sky was gray. The city moved on, people hurrying past, unaware that my world had ended inside that courtroom. The cold wind bit through my coat. I did not cry, not yet. The tears sat deep in my chest, waiting for silence. I walked to the parking lot, but there was no car waiting for me anymore. I had sold it to pay legal fees. I stood by the curb, clutching the papers that spelled out my failure, my heart pounding against them as if it wanted to escape. The streetlights flickered as the first drops of rain began to fall. I did not move. I just stood there, watching the wet asphalt reflect the city lights like 1,000 small mirrors of my loss. It felt strange how quickly a life could be stripped away. One moment I was a wife, a business partner, a woman with plans. The next, I was a stranger to my own past. I kept replaying everything in my head. The arguments, the quiet dinners, the late nights when he stopped answering my calls. I had seen the end coming long before it arrived, but I still believed love could fix it. I walked until the courthouse disappeared behind me. The rain grew heavier, soaking through my coat. It made everything blur, even the ache in my chest. I passed a cafe we used to visit. I paused for a moment, looking through the window. Someone sat in the same corner we used to sit in. 2 cups of coffee, steam rising gently. I turned away. By the time I reached my apartment, the rain had turned into a storm. The walls were bare, the floor empty except for the thin mattress I had dragged from the thrift store 2 days ago. My life had been reduced to 1 room and 4 walls. I sank onto the mattress, my body cold and heavy. The tears finally came. They were not loud or dramatic. They were slow, quiet, steady. The kind of crying that came from the deepest part of grief, where words no longer made sense. I pressed my face into my pillow, wishing I could disappear into it. When I woke up hours later, my face felt stiff from tears, but my mind was strangely calm. The shock had dulled into a slow, simmering ache. I realized that no one was coming to help me. Not Daniel. Not friends who had chosen his side. Not even the family that said I would be fine. I was truly alone. For the first time, I allowed that truth to settle in. It was painful, but it was also freeing in a way. There was nothing left to lose. No expectations, no obligations, no illusions. Only me. I got up and looked at myself in the cracked mirror by the wall. My eyes were swollen, my hair a mess, my expression tired. But beneath that, there was something else. Something steady. A spark. I did not recognize it at first, but it was strength. Not the kind that shouts or breaks things, but the kind that survives. That night, I wrote down 3 words on a torn piece of paper and taped it to the mirror. Start again, Sophia. The sound of thunder rolled through the city as I stood there, whispering those words to myself over and over. My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger each time. Start again. I did not know how. I did not know where. But I knew one thing for certain. I would rise again, and the world would remember my name. The first night in the apartment felt like stepping into a memory that was not mine. The room was small, square, and hollow, with walls that echoed every sound I made. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. The air was damp, cold, and heavy, and the silence pressed against my skin until it hurt. I dropped the old mattress I had bought from a stranger online onto the bare floor. It made a dull sound as it hit the concrete. That sound stayed in my chest. The room smelled faintly of dust and paint. The window did not close properly, and a thin breeze slipped through the cracks, whispering through the curtains that were no longer white. I sat on the mattress with my knees pulled to my chest, watching the shadows shift across the floor. I had nothing else. No furniture, no television, no warmth. Just a mattress, a few clothes, and a bag filled with documents I could not bring myself to read again. The silence became unbearable, so I opened the window wider. The city hummed below. Cars moved, people talked, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. Life continued, indifferent to my loss. I wanted to scream just to remind the world that I still existed. But my voice stayed trapped inside me. I thought about Daniel again. About the way he used to fill every space we shared. His laughter, his presence, his control. For years, I had built my life around him. Now, every empty inch of this apartment reminded me of how wrong that was. I had handed him my strength, my faith, my dreams, piece by piece, until I had nothing left that was just mine. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbor's television through them. A sitcom played, the sound of canned laughter filling the air. It felt cruel, like the world was mocking me for being alone. I turned to the window again, letting the cool air sting my face. I spent that first week trying to learn how to survive with nothing. I learned how to sleep without comfort. I learned how to cook on a single burner stove that barely worked. I learned that silence could be both punishment and peace, depending on the hour. Every morning, I woke up and stared at the ceiling for a long time before getting up. I did not have a job yet. Most days, I simply wandered the streets, trying to find something that looked like a beginning. I would sit in cafes, order the cheapest coffee, and pretend I was reading. But my eyes never stayed on the page. They followed the people instead. Couples laughing, friends talking, parents holding children. I used to be one of them. Now, I was an observer. A ghost in daylight. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in shop windows and barely recognized myself. My face looked older, my eyes dull. I had lost weight. My hair hung in uneven waves because I could not afford the salon anymore. I started tying it back just to keep it out of my face. I stopped wearing makeup because there was no one left to impress. The worst moments were the nights. The city grew quieter, and the walls seemed to close in. I would lie on my mattress staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks like they were stars. Every creak, every sound from the pipes, made me flinch. I was not used to being alone. I had gone from a full house, shared laughter, and constant noise to absolute stillness. There were days I could not bring myself to eat. Days I barely moved. But there were also small moments that kept me going. Like the old woman who ran the shop downstairs, who always added an extra fruit into my bag and smiled. Or the stray cat that began to visit my window every evening, sitting there quietly like it understood my silence. I started keeping a small notebook. At first, it was just lists of things I needed. Soap, bread, batteries. Then it became something else. A place to empty my thoughts. I wrote about the nights I missed him. I wrote about the anger that burned beneath the sadness. I wrote about the unfairness of it all. But slowly, my words began to change. I started writing about the things I wanted instead. Not the life I lost, but the life I could still build. It was not hope, not yet. It was more like stubbornness. A refusal to stay broken. One night, after days of silence, I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, "You are still here." My voice sounded strange. Shaky, rough, but real. I said it again. "You are still here." The words filled the room, bouncing off the walls until they no longer sounded weak. I began to see that this place, this cold apartment, could be the beginning of something. It had nothing, but it also had no memories of failure. Every inch of it was blank. I could fill it with anything I wanted. I found a job at a small bookstore a few blocks away. The pay was low, but it gave me a reason to get up. The owner, a kind man with gray hair and kind eyes, let me take home any book I wanted to read. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of peace. The smell of paper and ink wrapped around me like comfort. Every evening after work, I would come home, make tea, and read until the light flickered out. The stories became my escape, but also my reminder that life could begin again, no matter how lost you felt. I started adding small things to the apartment. A blanket from the thrift store. A small lamp. A second-hand chair. Each item felt like a quiet victory. I began to see beauty in simplicity. The mattress no longer looked like defeat. It looked like survival. Sometimes, when I stood by the window at night, I would look at the city lights and whisper a promise to myself. That one day, I would no longer just survive. I would live. The cold apartment was still quiet, still imperfect, but it was mine. My pain lived there, yes, but so did my strength. The flickering light above me no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a heartbeat, faint but alive. That was the moment I understood something important. Losing everything had stripped me bare, but it had also given me the chance to rebuild with intention. To choose every piece of my life carefully. To live not out of habit, but out of purpose. The cold apartment was not just a shelter. It was a mirror. It reflected who I was, and who I was becoming. Someone no longer defined by loss, but by quiet endurance. Someone who could stand in emptiness and still find meaning. And even though the nights were still long, even though the silence still hurt sometimes, I began to feel something warm growing inside me. The first fragile seed of hope. It did not matter that I had nothing. What mattered was that I was still standing. Still breathing. Still here. The day it happened was gray and wet, the kind of rain that feels endless. It soaked the city until everything looked blurred, washed clean but heavy. I remember walking home from work that evening, clutching my thin coat around me, my shoes soaked through. The streets glistened under the streetlights, and puddles formed small mirrors that reflected a life I barely recognized. The bookstore had closed early because of the storm. I stayed behind for a few minutes, sweeping the wet floor near the entrance, delaying my walk home. I had grown used to the routine, the comfort of the bookshelves and the quiet hum of soft music. Outside those walls, the world still felt uncertain. But when the owner turned off the lights and told me to go home before the rain worsened, I had no excuse to stay. By the time I reached my street, I was cold to the bone. The wind pushed against me, sharp and relentless. I kept my eyes down, avoiding the puddles and the people rushing past with umbrellas. I remember thinking that I had never felt smaller in my life. I was alive, yes, but still lost. Still floating. Then I heard someone call my name. Sophia? The sound barely reached me over the rain, but it was there, clear, deliberate, certain. I froze. Hardly anyone in this part of the city knew my name. I turned, squinting through the downpour. A man stood across the street, holding something under his coat. His hair was wet, his tie loosened, and his shoes splashed through the water as he stepped toward me. Sophia, he called again, his voice firm but kind. Please wait. Every instinct told me to keep walking. I did not trust strangers, not anymore. But something in his tone made me pause. He was not threatening. He looked tired, maybe nervous. There was sincerity in his eyes, even from a distance. I stepped back as he approached, my hands trembling slightly. Who are you? I asked. My voice came out softer than I intended. My name is David Turner, he said, pulling a folded envelope from inside his coat. I have been trying to reach you for weeks. I do not understand, I said. My heart began to race. He nodded, understanding my confusion. I am a lawyer, he explained. I represent the estate of Margaret Whitmore. The name hit me like thunder. My grandmother. I had not heard her name in years. The last time I saw her, I was a teenager. She was distant, elegant, and strict, the kind of woman who spoke more through glances than words. My parents rarely talked about her after that. They said she had her own life, her own priorities. Eventually, I stopped asking. I think you have the wrong person, I said, shaking my head. My grandmother passed away a long time ago. Yes, he said. About 6 weeks ago. Something in his expression changed. He looked at me with quiet understanding, as though he already knew I was not ready for what he was about to say. She left something for you, he continued, holding out the envelope. I was asked to deliver this in person. I hesitated. My hands were wet, shaking slightly as I reached for it. The paper was thick and sealed with an embossed emblem I did not recognize. I turned it over, staring at my name written in her familiar handwriting. Sophia Whitmore, it read. My throat tightened. I had not seen that name written anywhere since the day I got married and changed it. Why now? I asked. Why would she leave me anything? He hesitated. She wanted to make sure it went directly to you. She said you would understand when the time came. I stood there, the rain running down my face, mixing with tears I did not expect. For years, I had convinced myself that no one in my family cared about me. And yet here I was, standing in the rain with a stranger who claimed that someone, somewhere, had remembered me. Is this some kind of mistake? I asked quietly. No, he said firmly. It is not a mistake. There are documents you will need to review. But the short version is this: she left you everything. The words hung between us, impossible to grasp. I do not understand, I whispered. She left you her estate, her assets, everything in her will, he said slowly, carefully. $47 million, to be exact. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. The sound of the rain faded, replaced by a strange, ringing silence in my head. I think you should come with me, he said gently. We can go through the details together. You will want to see the letter she wrote you. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or run. My first thought was disbelief. My second was fear. Nothing about my life had prepared me for this. Just weeks ago, I could barely afford rent. Now someone was standing in front of me, saying I had inherited a fortune. Why would she do that? I asked again, my voice breaking. We were never close. David offered a small, knowing smile. Maybe that is what she wanted to change. I followed him to a nearby cafe, the only place still open that late. We sat by the window, both dripping wet, steam rising from the coffee cups between us. The lights flickered softly, and the rain outside blurred the world beyond the glass. He opened a folder and placed it on the table. Inside were several official-looking documents, all stamped and signed. My name appeared again and again. He showed me photographs of the estate, an old mansion surrounded by trees, a lake nearby, a garden that looked like something out of a dream. This is all yours, he said. I traced my fingers over the image, unable to speak. Then he handed me another envelope, smaller, sealed in red wax. She wrote you a letter, he said quietly. I hesitated before opening it. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Her handwriting was neat, elegant, exactly as I remembered. My dearest Sophia, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I have thought of you often, though you may not believe it. You were always different, always stronger than they saw. Life has been unkind to you, but I have watched from afar and admired your courage. Everything I leave to you is not payment for pain. It is a bridge to freedom. I want you to rebuild, to live without fear, to stand tall in your own name. The fortune is not just wealth, but responsibility. Use it wisely. Love. Your grandmother, Margaret. The words blurred through my tears. I read them over and over, barely able to breathe. David watched quietly, giving me space. When I finally looked up, he nodded slowly. She must have trusted you more than anyone else, he said. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. The bitterness, the loss, the despair, they did not vanish, but they softened. My life had been built on loss, but here was proof that someone had seen me, believed in me, and left me with something powerful enough to change everything. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle. I looked out the window and saw my reflection faintly in the glass. I no longer looked like a woman defeated. I looked like someone about to begin again. When I left the cafe, David walked me to the corner, his briefcase under his arm. You will have a lot to think about, he said. But for tonight, just rest. Tomorrow, your new life begins. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. As I walked back to my small apartment, the rain stopped completely. The air smelled fresh, clean, new. The street lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and somewhere deep inside me, I felt something awaken, a quiet strength I had forgotten I had. By the time I reached my building, I looked down at the letter in my hands. The paper was damp but intact. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. A bridge to freedom. That night, I placed the letter on my bedside table and lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I did not feel small or broken. I felt seen. And as I drifted to sleep, one thought circled in my mind sometimes. The life you lose is not the end. Sometimes, it is only the beginning you never expected. The next morning, the rain had cleared. Sunlight pushed through the curtains, soft and golden, painting the edges of my small apartment in warmth I had not felt in a long time. I sat up slowly, my back sore from the thin mattress, and stared at the letter still lying on the bedside table. It looked ordinary in the light of day, but I knew it was not. It was a key, and somewhere beyond this small room, a door had just opened. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the quiet street below. The world moved as if nothing had changed, yet everything in my life had shifted overnight. I ran my fingers over the letter again, feeling the faint texture of my grandmother's handwriting pressed into the paper. I wanted to read it once more, this time not in shock or disbelief, but with understanding. When I unfolded it again, I read slowly, letting every word settle in my chest. My dearest Sophia, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and my last wish has reached you. I have watched you from afar, not because I wanted distance, but because life and family made it difficult to be close. I knew you suffered more than you ever said. I knew they took from you, not money or property, but peace. I saw the way they silenced your spirit, and I want to give it back to you. The world is cruel to gentle souls, my dear. But gentleness is not weakness. I have always believed that strength was quiet faces. You may not have known this, but I built my estate from the ground up, just as you will rebuild your own life. My business partners called me stubborn. I called it survival. You have that same spark. It is why I chose you. The inheritance is not meant to erase your pain, but to help you begin again. Promise me one thing, never use it to seek revenge. Use it to heal. Use it to create. With love. Your grandmother, Margaret. I set the letter down and leaned back in my chair. The room felt smaller somehow, or maybe I had just become larger inside it. My grandmother had seen what no one else did. She had noticed the cracks I tried to hide. She had understood what it meant to lose yourself while pretending to be fine. As I sipped my coffee, I realized how much I had missed her presence, even if I never truly had it. The memories came slowly, like whispers from another lifetime. Her perfume that smelled like jasmine and cedar, her voice calm and measured, her sharp eyes that could read truth faster than words. I remembered the last time we spoke. I was 18, about to leave for college. She came to see me, a rare visit, and she gave me a small book of poetry. I barely said thank you. I was young, full of pride, eager to prove myself without help. When she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "You are stronger than you think, my girl." I did not know then how much I would need those words later. Now, sitting in this quiet apartment, I finally understood. She had seen me falling before I even stumbled. She had known that one day I would need a reason to stand again. I picked up the letter once more and noticed something I had missed. There was a second page folded neatly behind the first. My heart quickened as I unfolded it. There is one more thing I want you to know. The house, the estate, the investments, all of them are yours. Yes, but they come with a story. You are not the first woman in our family to rebuild from ruins. My mother lost everything in a war. I lost everything in a betrayal. You lost everything in love. It seems the curse of the Whitmore women is endurance. But that curse is also a gift. We do not break. I left behind a diary for you in the main house library, hidden behind the third shelf from the left. Inside, you will find the truth about our family's rise and fall, and why I chose to trust you. It will help you understand the value of what you now hold. When you are ready, go home. You will know what to do next. I read that line over and over again. Go home. For a long time, I did not know what home meant anymore. My marriage had erased that word from my heart. My parents had turned it into something heavy. But now, for the first time in years, it sounded like a promise instead of a wound. I spent the rest of the day pacing around the apartment. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to find the house, to see everything she had left behind. But another part of me needed time to breathe, to understand, to let the truth sink in. I called David, the lawyer, later that evening. "Mr. Turner," I said softly when he answered. "I read her letter." "I thought you might," he replied. "Are you ready to visit the estate?" "Soon," I said. "There is something I need to process first." "Of course," he said kindly. "Take your time. It will be waiting for you." After we hung up, I looked around my apartment again. The thin mattress, the chipped mug, the worn-out coat, all of it represented survival. But not for much longer. My grandmother had left me the means to live again, not just survive. That night, I sat down with a notebook and began to write. It started as a list of questions. Why now? Why me? What truth was hidden behind those shelves? But slowly, the list turned into plans. I wrote about what I wanted, who I wanted to become, how I would use this gift. I wrote until the page filled with hope. When I finally stopped, I looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like quiet stars. For the first time in months, I did not feel trapped. I felt guided. The next morning, I packed a small bag. I did not own much, just a few clothes, a photo album, the letter, and the key David had given me. I paused before locking the door to my apartment, realizing I might never come back. The silence that once haunted me now felt peaceful. As I stepped outside, the morning air carried the faint scent of rain and blooming flowers. The streets were alive again. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "It is time." I walked to the train station, clutching the letter like a compass. Each word from my grandmother replayed in my mind.
Gentleness is not weakness.
Use it to heal.
Go home. The train ride was long and quiet.
Fields rolled past the window, the city fading into open countryside.
I thought about how strange it was that life could turn in a single day.
Yesterday, I had been invisible. Today, I carried the weight of a legacy. When the train finally slowed near the old town where my grandmother used to live, I felt a pull deep inside me, like something familiar was waiting.
The station was small, surrounded by trees and silence.
As I stepped off the train, a gust of wind carried the scent of pine and rain. I closed my eyes for a moment and felt a strange peace settle over me. In that moment, I realized that the letter was not just about inheritance. It was an invitation to become the woman my grandmother believed I could be. And for the first time in my life, I felt ready to meet her expectation not out of duty, but out of gratitude. When I opened my eyes, I whispered into the breeze, "I am coming home." I traveled to claim what she left me, and for the first time in years, I feel like I have a future again. The journey feels surreal, like stepping into a dream that does not quite belong to me yet. The air outside the airport smells different, lighter, filled with promise instead of despair. I carry only one suitcase, the same one I used when I left my old life behind, but this time it feels less like baggage and more like a companion to new beginnings. When I arrive at the lawyer's office, the moment feels sacred. The building is old, elegant, and quiet. The man who once stood in the rain now greets me with a soft smile. He offers tea, but I can barely sip it. My heart beats fast as he hands me a set of documents with my name printed boldly on them. I read words I can hardly comprehend, words like inheritance, estate, and beneficiary. I ask if there has been a mistake, but he shakes his head. He tells me my grandmother spoke of me often, even when the rest of the family had turned their backs. As he reads her letter aloud, I realize she had been watching all along. She saw me struggle through the divorce, the loneliness, the humiliation. She wrote about strength, resilience, and the belief that life eventually rewards those who survive the fire without losing their soul. I cry, not just for her loss, but for the love I never knew was waiting for me. The next few days are a blur of travel and discovery. I fly to the city where her main estate is located. The house stands tall on a hill, surrounded by trees that seem to whisper her name. Inside, everything is untouched, as if she had known I would one day walk through that door. Her picture hangs in the hallway, eyes kind, lips curved in a knowing smile. I touch the frame gently and whisper, "Thank you." I spend nights wandering through the vast rooms, imagining her life here. I find journals filled with her handwriting, stories of her youth, dreams she chased, mistakes she learned from. In one entry, she wrote, "If Sophia ever finds this, tell her she is meant to build, not to break." That single line changes everything for me. I start to rebuild not only my life but my confidence. I wake early, I plan, I dream again. I meet with advisors, not to flaunt wealth, but to understand it. I realize that what she left me was more than money. It was a message, a legacy, a second chance to live on my own terms. The cold apartment I once lived in becomes a distant memory. The silence that once crushed me now feels peaceful. I cook breakfast again. I write. I smile. I remember who I am. In her final letter, she wrote, "One day, you will see that losing everything was not the end. It was the beginning." I finally understand what she meant. I am no longer defined by what I lost. I am shaped by what I found within myself when I had nothing left. This is my rebirth, quiet but powerful, not marked by fireworks or applause, but by a woman finding her way back to life. The mansion feels alive, breathing with echoes of the past. Every creak of the wooden floor, every flicker of light against the old walls tells a story waiting to be heard. When I first step inside, I am struck by the scent of time itself, a mix of aged wood, lavender, and something faintly metallic. The lawyer hands me a set of old-fashioned keys and tells me the place has been locked for years. As the heavy doors open, I feel as though I am entering not just a house, but a memory I was never part of. The air inside is cool and still. Dust hangs like mist in the sunlight that seeps through tall stained windows. The silence is deep, almost holy, but underneath it there is something else. Something waiting.
The portraits on the wall catch my attention first.
Faces I do not recognize, but with features that somehow feel familiar. Eyes that seem to follow me, lips that almost smile. I realize these are my ancestors, people who lived, loved, and built the foundation that now stands beneath my feet. As I explore room after room, I find parts of my grandmother's life scattered everywhere. Her handwriting on recipe cards in the kitchen, a book left open on a nightstand, a shawl still draped over a chair.
It feels as though she never really left.
In her study, I find a small wooden box, locked with a delicate clasp.
Inside it is a letter, addressed to me.
My dear Sophia, it begins.
This house is more than a home. It holds the truth about who we are, and why I chose you.
Do not be afraid of what you find here. The past is heavy, but it belongs to us both. The words send a chill through me. I begin to look closer, paying attention to what I once thought were ordinary details. Behind one of the large framed portraits, I discover a hidden compartment. Inside are letters tied with a faded ribbon.
They are addressed to my grandmother from a man whose name I do not know.
As I read them, a forbidden love story unfolds, one that shaped generations. A love that could not be acknowledged publicly because of family pride and politics. In that moment, I understand the silence that had always surrounded her. She carried not only her own pain but the weight of choices made before her time. And perhaps, by leaving everything to me, she wanted to ensure that the truth did not die in secrecy. I find journals too, pages filled with business dealings, philanthropy plans, and handwritten notes about the estate's workers. My grandmother was not just wealthy, she was wise and generous. She invested in people quietly, believing that real power was in lifting others up. One evening, I walk through the gardens as the sun sets. The estate stretches endlessly, with hidden paths and fountains that have long gone dry. I stumble upon a greenhouse covered in vines. Inside, I find plants still blooming, tended by an old caretaker who tells me he never left because he promised my grandmother he would stay until her heir arrived. When I tell him I am her granddaughter, his eyes soften, and he says, "She always knew you would come."
The realization hits me deeply.
My grandmother's love and faith in me were never accidental. She had been preparing this legacy long before I even knew it existed. The mansion, the letters, the memories, they are all pieces of a puzzle she wanted me to complete. At night, as I stand by the balcony overlooking the estate, I feel a sense of peace I have never known. The wind moves through the trees like whispers from generations past.
I finally understand why she chose me. It was not just about bloodline or inheritance.
It was about heart, resilience, and the ability to rebuild what was broken. The hidden estate is not just a place. It is a message carved into the walls of time, telling me that family is not always about perfection. It is about endurance, forgiveness, and the courage to face the truth. And now, that truth belongs to me.
It happens on a rainy afternoon.
I am sitting in the grand library of the estate, reading through another one of my grandmother's journals, when I hear the sound of tires crunching over gravel. At first, I assume it is the caretaker returning from town, but when I glance out the tall window, my heart stops. The sleek black car parked outside is unmistakable.
Daniel.
For a moment, I simply sit there, frozen. Memories flood my mind like a storm.
His voice calling me weak. His cold eyes watching me cry without emotion.
The feeling of constantly walking on eggshells, begging for peace in a house that was never truly home. I take a deep breath, steadying myself.
I am not that woman anymore.
When he steps through the door, he is exactly as I remember him, polished, confident, smiling that same insincere smile. The kind of smile that once fooled me into thinking he loved me. Now, I see it for what it truly is, a mask. He looks around the mansion slowly, admiration and calculation blending in his eyes. "Sophia," he says softly, as if my name itself is a performance. "You look good. You must have been busy."
I say nothing at first.
I simply watch him, studying the lines of his face, the way his hands twitch slightly in his pockets.
He's nervous. Good. I want him to be.
When I finally speak, my voice is calm. "What do you want, Daniel?" He shrugs lightly, pretending casualness. "I heard about your inheritance," he says. "I just wanted to check in, make sure you're doing okay."
You know, after everything. The words sting, but not because of their meaning. They sting because they are so empty.
He is here not because he cares, but because he cannot stand the thought of me having something he does not control. The same man who once left me crying in a cold apartment now stands in my grandmother's mansion, pretending to care.
I'm fine, I reply simply. He steps closer.
Come on, Sophia.
Don't be like that. We shared years together. I was shocked when I heard.
You never told me your grandmother was so wealthy.
I can almost laugh at his choice of words. Wealthy.
That's all he sees, not the history, not the struggle, not the lessons I've learned.
Just the money.
I realize, in that moment, that Daniel has not changed. He is still the man who measures worth in bank accounts and status, not in love or integrity. I didn't think it mattered to you, I say, my tone sharp but calm. After all, you made it clear that I had nothing worth keeping.
He flinches. Just a little. I see it, and it gives me strength. Come on, he says, attempting a laugh. You know I didn't mean it like that. Things were complicated.
Maybe we could start over.
You and me. Clean slate.
The audacity of it almost takes my breath away. He looks around again, clearly impressed by what he sees. His eyes pause on the portraits, the chandelier, the grand piano in the corner. He imagines himself here, living in luxury at my side, playing the part of the redeemed ex-husband.
But I see through it all. I always have.
Start over. I repeat softly. Daniel, you didn't even come to the hospital when I got sick.
You didn't call when I had nowhere to go. You walked away without a backward glance. Why now? He hesitates.
People make mistakes, he says finally. I just want to make things right. By showing up when you think I have money.
The words fall heavy between us. The truth is sharp, undeniable. He tries to smile again, but this time, it falters.
Sophia, he says quietly, you don't understand what it's like to lose everything.
I stare at him, and I almost laugh again.
Daniel, I lost everything. You took it from me.
The silence that follows is deep and raw.
For the first time, I see something real in his eyes, not love, not remorse, but recognition.
He knows he can't manipulate me anymore. The woman standing before him is not the same one he left behind. He shifts awkwardly, realizing the power dynamic has changed.
You've really changed, he mutters.
I had to, I reply.
You made sure of it. He leaves soon after, with forced politeness and empty promises to stay in touch. When the door closes behind him, I stand there for a long time, staring at the rain streaking down the windows.
My heart feels both heavy and free.
Daniel's visit wasn't about love.
It was about power.
But what he doesn't know is that I've already taken that back. I walk back to the library, light a candle, and sit at my grandmother's old desk. I write a single line in my journal. The past can knock, but it no longer has the key. For the first time in a long while, I smile. The weeks after Daniel's visit feel different. The house, once quiet and lonely, now carries a strange hum of energy. I walk through its hallways not as a broken woman rebuilding from ashes, but as someone who finally holds the reins of her life. Yet with that control comes a dangerous whisper, the urge to make those who hurt me feel what I once felt.
It starts small. I see Daniel's messages pile up on my phone.
Apologies, half-truths, little attempts to crawl back into my world. I ignore them at first, but then the thought crosses my mind.
What if I replied?
What if I played along, just long enough to remind him what he lost? The temptation tastes sweet for a second, but I stop myself. I know where that road leads to bitterness, not peace. Instead, I turn my focus to understanding the power I now hold. My inheritance is not just money, it is freedom. Freedom from fear, from dependence, from needing anyone's approval. I realize that I have the means to build something lasting, something that reflects who I am, not who I used to be. Still, there are moments when the past whispers too loudly. One night, I dream of the courtroom where Daniel smirked as he took everything. I wake up trembling, anger coursing through me like fire. The idea of revenge dances before me like a shadow. I imagine him seeing me now, dressed in confidence, living in a home beyond anything he could ever own. For a brief moment, I want him to hurt the way I did.
But my grandmother's words echo in my mind.
In her letter, she wrote, "Power without peace is still a cage."
I understand it now.
If I use my power to destroy, I become the same as those who use theirs to wound me.
True strength is the ability to walk away when every part of you wants to strike back.
So I start testing myself in smaller ways. I reach out to people who once looked down on me, not with pride, but with grace. I visit old places that used to make me cry, this time standing tall. The fear fades, little by little, replaced by calm. I realize that forgiveness is not weakness, it is freedom from the constant replay of pain. One afternoon, I receive a letter from Daniel's lawyer.
He is struggling financially. His new ventures failed.
He asks for help, using words like partnership and rebuilding. I fold the letter quietly and place it in a drawer without replying. There is no satisfaction in his suffering. There is only silence, my silence, and it is more powerful than any revenge. In the weeks that follow, I learn to manage my wealth with care. I meet with financial advisors, estate managers, and charity directors. Every meeting teaches me something new, not just about business, but about balance. I invest in projects that align with my values, education, mental health, and rebuilding lives for people like me who once had nothing. The mansion slowly becomes more than a symbol of inheritance. It becomes a home. I host dinners with old friends, laughter filling the rooms that once echoed with emptiness. The bitterness that once lingered inside me dissolves, replaced by a quiet pride. One evening, as I sit on the terrace watching the sunset, I think about Daniel again. I wonder if he ever truly loved me, or if love, for him, was always just another form of control.
The thought doesn't hurt anymore.
It simply exists, a small reminder of who I was, and how far I've come. The test of power, I realize, is not in gaining it.
It is in deciding how to use it.
I could have sought revenge, ruined reputations, or made people beg for my forgiveness. Instead, I chose something greater, peace. The next morning, I write another line in my journal. Power is not about who bows to you. It is about who you rise above without pushing them down.
I close the book, feeling lighter.
The world feels different now, not because it changed, but because I did. I survived the storm, rebuilt my life, and learned the hardest lesson of all, that true power does not roar. It stands silent, steady, and unshaken. And in that silence, I finally find myself. The morning light filters through the tall windows of the mansion. It paints the room in gold and warmth. I stand by the window, holding a cup of tea, watching the world outside wake up. For the first time in years, I do not feel the weight of loss. I feel purpose.
The idea comes to me quietly. It is not about wealth or status. It is about meaning. I have been given more than money. I have been given a second chance at life.
I remember the long nights in that cold apartment when I had nothing.
The loneliness. The fear. The feeling of being forgotten. I remember wishing for just one person to believe in me. Now I can be that person for someone else. I begin to plan.
Not as a businesswoman chasing profit, but as someone who knows what it feels like to have nothing. I decide to start a foundation in my grandmother's name. A place that will help women and men rebuild after loss. A place for those who think their stories have ended when, in truth, they are only beginning. The first step is gathering a team.
I meet with people who share the same vision. Some are survivors of their own storms. Others are simply kind souls who want to help.
Together we sit in the study room, surrounded by papers, blueprints, and ideas. The energy is alive. I can feel my grandmother's spirit in the room, as if she is guiding every decision I make.
We name it the Foundation of Hope.
The title feels right. It carries the same promise my grandmother gave me in her letter. A promise that no pain is wasted if it leads to growth. The foundation will offer scholarships, shelters, and mentorship programs.
It will give people the tools to start again with dignity.
When the official launch day arrives, I stand on the stage in front of a small crowd. Journalists, donors, volunteers, and a few people from my past are present. The same people who once whispered about my downfall now watch me with respect. I breathe deeply and begin to speak.
I talk about loss. I talk about pain.
I talk about how strength does not come from never falling, but from standing up again and again. The words flow from my heart, not from a script.
The room is silent. Some people cry.
When I finish, the applause feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. After the event, a young woman approaches me. Her eyes are filled with tears.
She says she went through a divorce too. She says she lost her home and almost gave up.
She tells me that my story gave her hope. I hold her hands and tell her the same thing my grandmother told me in her letter.
You are not done yet. That night, I sit in the garden of the mansion under the stars. The wind is gentle.
The world feels quiet and safe. I think about the long road that brought me here.
The heartbreak. The betrayal. The loneliness. All of it was leading me to this moment.
I realize that purpose is the most powerful form of healing. It turns pain into something that can help others.
It transforms scars into lessons.
It turns tragedy into strength.
I finally understand why my grandmother left the fortune to me. She knew I would not waste it on revenge or pride. She knew I would build something that mattered.
In the weeks that follow, the foundation grows. Donations come in.
Partnerships form.
Lives begin to change. Each story that reaches me reminds me of where I came from and why I must continue. The mansion no longer feels like a symbol of loss.
It feels like a sanctuary.
One afternoon, as I walk through the office of the foundation, I stop by a framed photo of my grandmother.
Her kind smile seems to follow me.
I whisper a quiet thank you. Thank you for believing in me when I did not believe in myself. Thank you for teaching me that hope is not a gift.
It is a choice.
Every success story that comes through the foundation feels like another piece of my heart being healed. I see women start new businesses. Men return to school.
Families find homes again.
The same warmth I once longed for now spreads through others.
I know that my life will never be the same.
I am no longer the woman who lost everything. I am no longer the victim of betrayal. I am someone who turned pain into purpose. Someone who understands that true wealth is not measured in money, but in impact. As the sun sets that evening, I stand on the balcony overlooking the city. I smile softly and whisper to myself, this is the beginning of something beautiful. And in that moment, I know that my grandmother's legacy lives on through me. Not through the mansion or the money, but through every life touched by hope.
The city looks different now.
Maybe it has not changed at all, but I have. The same streets that once swallowed me in despair now feel like reminders of strength. The cold wind that once stung my face feels like a whisper of survival. I walk with calm steps, not rushing, not afraid, just present. When I left this city, I was broken. My heart was in pieces, my dignity was gone, and my future seemed like a shadow fading into the distance. I remember dragging my suitcase through the rain that day, wondering if I would ever feel alive again. Now, as I walk back through these familiar streets, I carry no fear. Only gratitude.
I visit the courthouse first. The same one where my divorce was finalized. I stand outside, watching people rush in and out.
I wonder how many lives are changing behind those doors.
How many hearts are breaking or being set free. I close my eyes and breathe deeply.
That building used to represent loss for me, but now it represents transformation. It is the place where one chapter ended so another could begin. I move next to the small apartment I once rented after the divorce. The one with cracked walls and a broken heater. I stand outside the door and remember the silence, the loneliness, and the nights I cried until dawn.
But I also remember the strength I built there.
The first meal I cooked for myself.
The first journal entry I wrote about healing. The first time I said out loud, I will be fine. I whisper a quiet thank you to that place.
It taught me humility, patience, and endurance.
It stripped away everything that did not matter and left only what did.
It was in that apartment that I began to rebuild my spirit, brick by brick, tear by tear. Later that afternoon, I walk into a cafe that I used to visit during the hardest days. The owner still remembers me. She greets me with a warm smile and says, "You look different, Sophia."
I smile back.
"I feel different," I reply. We talk for a while about life, loss, and hope.
She tells me she once worried about me.
I tell her that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. As I sit by the window sipping coffee, I watch the people passing by. Some look tired, some lost, some joyful. I wonder how many of them are standing at the edge of their own transformation. How many are about to step into their strength without knowing it yet. In the evening, I return to the hotel where I am staying. It is elegant, but I choose a small suite with a balcony.
I never cared for luxury.
I care for peace.
I step outside and watch the city lights shimmer below.
The skyline glows, and I realize this is the same city that once made me cry myself to sleep. Now it inspires me. I take out my journal, the same one I used during the darkest days, and I begin to write. The first page was filled with pain, confusion, and fear. Now, as I turn to the last page, I write about growth, love, and freedom. My handwriting is steady.
My words are clear. I write, I am no longer who I was.
I am who I was meant to be. My foundation has grown beyond my dreams. The stories of the people it has helped fill me with pride. Every time someone rebuilds their life through the foundation, I feel like a part of me heals too. My grandmother's vision continues to live through every act of kindness, every success, every second chance given. One morning, I receive an invitation to speak at a women's conference in the city.
The topic is resilience after loss.
Standing on that stage, I look out at hundreds of faces. I tell them about my journey, from the court that ended my marriage to the stranger in the rain who brought me hope. I tell them about my grandmother's letter and how it changed my life. When I finish, the applause feels like a heartbeat that connects us all. Many women come up afterward to share their own stories. Some cry, some smile, some simply thank me. I realize that the pain I went through was never wasted. It became a bridge for others to cross from despair to strength.
That night, I walk alone by the waterfront.
The air is cool, and the moon reflects softly on the water.
I think about Daniel, my ex-husband. I no longer hate him. I no longer pity him either.
I simply understand that his chapter in my story was necessary for my growth. Without his betrayal, I might never have discovered the depths of my strength. I reach into my bag and pull out my grandmother's letter. The paper is old now, the edges soft from being read so many times. Her handwriting still feels alive. You will lose everything, but it will not be the end.
It will be the beginning. She was right. I fold the letter carefully and place it back in my bag.
I whisper into the night, I made it, Grandma. I finally made it. The wind moves gently through my hair, as if she is answering. When I return to the hotel, I feel light,
peaceful, complete.
I realize that coming full circle is not about going back to where you started. It is about seeing the same place with new eyes. The pain, the loss, the betrayal, they no longer define me. They shaped me, but they do not hold me. I look at my reflection in the mirror before going to bed. I see a woman who has lived through storms and found her sunlight. A woman who turned wounds into wisdom. A woman who no longer seeks validation because she has already found her worth. As I turn off the lights, I whisper my final thought of the night.
This is what healing looks like.
And in that quiet moment, I finally understand.
Losing everything did not destroy me. It set me free. It brought me home to myself.
There is a certain silence that only comes after pain. A silence that follows every heartbreak, every betrayal, every night you think you will never stand again.
I know that silence. I lived inside it.
I slept in it. I ate with it. For the longest time, I thought my story was over the day I lost everything. The day I walked out of that courtroom after my divorce, with nothing but a few bags and a broken heart.
I thought life had taken its final victory over me. But I was wrong.
Because sometimes, losing everything is how the universe clears space for what you truly deserve. When I moved into that cold apartment, I did not realize that I was stepping into my own rebirth. That the silence around me was not punishment, it was preparation. And when that stranger appeared in the rain, calling my name, I thought it was some cruel mistake.
But it was the beginning of a miracle I did not even dare to pray for. He told me about my grandmother's inheritance.
$4 to $7 million. I could barely breathe. I remember thinking, why me? I was the woman who had lost everything, who had been left behind.
But now I understand. My grandmother did not leave me money. She left me a message.
That everything I had been through, every tear, every failure, every lonely night had meaning.
She saw something in me that I had forgotten to see in myself.
She believed that I would not just survive, but rise.
That was when I learned the most powerful truth of all.
You are never truly powerless unless you stop believing in your own strength. When I traveled to claim that inheritance, I thought I was claiming wealth. But I was really claiming my identity. I discovered secrets about my family, yes, but more importantly, I discovered myself. I began to build something from nothing, not because of money, but because of purpose. And when Daniel, my ex-husband, tried to come back, pretending to care, I realized something I never knew before. Peace is the greatest revenge.
So I did not shout. I did not beg.
I simply smiled and said, "You taught me how to survive."
Thank you.
The look on his face told me everything. He saw it. The woman he once broke had become the woman he could never control again. And that, my friends, is what healing looks like. To everyone watching this right now, maybe you have lost something too. Maybe your world collapsed, your heart shattered, your plans disappeared. Maybe people laughed when you fell.
But hear me. You are not broken beyond repair.
You are becoming someone stronger, someone wiser, someone unshakable. You may not see it yet, but the same pain that is burning you now will someday become your light. You will wake up one morning and realize that you survived what was meant to destroy you, and in doing so, you found yourself.
So please, do not give up. Take one more step. Breathe one more time. Try one more day.
You never know, maybe right now, somewhere in the world, something good is already making its way toward you. Maybe there is someone holding a letter, a phone call, or a message that will change your life.
Because miracles do not always come in bright packages.
Sometimes, they walk toward you in the rain, holding an envelope with your name on it.
I used to think healing was about forgetting.
But I learned it is about remembering who you were before the world told you to be small. If my grandmother were here, I would tell her that her belief in me saved me. That her love reached across years and turned loss into legacy. I would tell her that her granddaughter became everything she dreamed of, not because of the inheritance, but because of the strength it revealed. And now, to you watching this, if my story touched you, if you saw a piece of yourself in my journey, do not leave without sharing your story too.
Because your pain matters. Your comeback matters.
Click that subscribe button. Leave a comment below and tell me what you have survived.
Tell me about the moment you found your strength.
I read every single one, and your story might help someone else who is watching in silence tonight. And if you believe in rising from the ashes, if you believe that pain can lead to purpose, then share this story. Share it with someone who is still standing in the dark, someone who needs to hear that it is not over yet.
Maybe your heart is tired.
Maybe you are just trying to make it to tomorrow.
But remember this, losing everything is not the end. It is the beginning of who you are meant to be. I know because I lived it.
I lost my home, my love, my dreams. But in the ruins, I found something more valuable than $4 to $7 million. Sometimes you must lose everything to discover your worth. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of strength, courage, and rebirth. Leave a comment below. Your story might be the light that guides someone else home.